Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women who are reshaping our world. Coming up, as femicide continues to be a serious problem across the globe, a highly moving story of a French woman who miraculously managed to escape being killed by her ex-boyfriend. Also, how a comic strip is helping to shatter taboos about menstruation for schoolchildren in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the woman who inspired Miss Moneypenny in James Bond novels and subsequent films. I'll be talking shortly to Dr Claire Hubbard-Hall, the author of a new book on the forgotten women of British intelligence. But we begin here in France, where 134 women were killed last year by their current or former partners. Tackling the rate of femicide was one of President Emmanuel Macron's pledges when he came to power in 2017. Since then, various measures have been put into place to try and reduce the number, but women's rights activists say that they have not been as effective as they should be. Here's the moving testimony of one French woman who managed to escape that fate back in 2020.
When Alicia looks back, she reflects upon the fact that she could have been just another statistic, a victim of femicide. Instead, she survived. She was just 22 years old when she drove to her ex-boyfriend's home to pick up her clothes. He was waiting for her with a weapon behind his back.
He punched the window of the car on the driver's side, and by the time I turned around, he was aiming a gun at me. He fired the first shot, and I looked at my stomach because I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't feel any pain. I just couldn't feel my legs anymore. I couldn't push down on the accelerator. I lifted my head, he moved slightly, and he waited for me to look at him to shoot me for the second time.
Alicia slumped forward onto the steering wheel. She'd been shot with two 9mm bullets. Her attacker then tried to slit her throat with a kitchen knife. At that moment, her best friend called.
I picked up the phone and I said, "He shot me." What she said to me later was, "I could hear you dying on the phone. I could hear you agonizing in pain. And I was trying to ask you questions to keep you conscious as long as possible."
Alicia fell into a coma. The doctors were eventually able to save her life. But there was a risk that she would never walk again. One of the bullets had become lodged in her spinal cord. The surgeons tried one last operation to remove it.
As soon as they took that bullet out of my spine, I was able to move my legs again. Just the once, but I moved them. Okay, I thought, great, I can move. Then I was in a wheelchair, and I had to learn how to deal with that. I had to learn how to wash myself, for example. I felt like a baby. I had to learn how to eat, how to use my legs again, to walk, everything.
Comment on fait après pour refaire confiance en l'être humain?
You have to. There's no other choice. I survived and I decided to live my life, to overcome it, so to speak. It's still there, obviously. It's a huge trauma. Every night I check that everything's locked at home. Firecrackers put me on edge. I'm not comfortable in a crowd either, but I'm not going to stop living. I'm not the one who should give up my life.
The trial lasted 5 days. In the end, Alicia's ex-boyfriend was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The young woman says she's satisfied with the verdict and that she harbours no hatred, nor does she hope for revenge. She has one simple desire: to turn the page and start living her life again.
An amazing story. To Africa now, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo, many girls skip class because of the taboos surrounding menstruation, not to mention a lack of sanitary facilities in schools. So one NGO is trying to break those taboos among school children by using a comic strip, as our team on the ground report.
In this classroom in Kinshasa, Anita tries to break down taboos concerning menstruation.
When you get older, you will have periods. And when that will happen, you should not feel ashamed.
She's fighting clichés using a comic called Kankou. It tells the story of a teenage boy who helps his sister while she has her period. Armed with the comic, Anita can explain to pupils what happens to girls' bodies once they reach puberty.
They can't go into the same showers. They can't touch the utensils. Why? Because they're menstruating. Because it's believed that menstruation, that blood, makes a woman impure. and can make anything she touches impure, when it's not true.
In this setting, school children can ask any questions without embarrassment. The back and forth is frank and direct. In DR Congo, having your period at school is all too often seen as something to be ashamed of. Louise and her friends say that they've witnessed girls being ridiculed.
When my friend went to the blackboard to write, her uniform was stained, and the boys laughed, saying she's a dirty girl, that she's dirty, she gets red things on her skirt, and she's dirty. She cried and left the room.
Girls face taboos, but also practical hindrances. The school is almost derelict, and the sanitary facilities are out of order. According to the school headmaster, many girls skip classes every month because of their periods.
When a girl takes 4 days off, she misses classes. In our secondary school, there are 7 hours of lessons a day. So over 4 or 5 days, it is a lot. It has an influence on her schooling.
The NGO hopes to distribute its Kongu comic book to every school in Kinshasa and raise awareness among pupils and parents alike. In DR Congo, only 1 woman in 2 has access to sanitary products.
Now, in the course of doing this show for more than a decade, we've often spoken about the incredible lack of recognition of women's role in history. Well, here's another example. The stories of those women who contributed to British intelligence in the last 100 years or so. Now, a new book entitled Her Secret Service, The Forgotten Women of British Intelligence, has been written by the historian Dr Claire Hubbard-Hall, who joins me now from Lincoln in the UK. Claire, thank you so much for your time. What made you decide to write this book?
Well, that is a story in itself. Just before the pandemic, I was gifted a copy of Stella Rimington's memoir, Open Secret. She was the first woman to head MI5, Britain's domestic security service, in the early 1990s. And it took me just a day to devour the contents of the memoir. And I was really taken back by how honest and candid she was about the challenges that she faced on her rise to the top. But I was left with one burning question after reading her memoir, which was, where was the history of women in British intelligence? I just couldn't find it. And that really sort of set me on the journey, with the end result being the book.
And of course, the eye-catching element about your book is the story of the woman who inspired Miss Moneypenny in James Bond novels and films. Tell us a little bit more about the person behind the story of Miss M.
So, Miss Moneypenny, the real Miss Moneypenny, was Kathleen Pettigrew. Now, a number of women have been touted as being her, their associations with Ian Fleming and wartime intelligence, but Kathleen Pettigrew really fits the bill. And she was a long-term careerist MI6 secretary who rose right to the top, working within the head of MI6, known as C, his inner circle during the Second World War. Now, what's particularly interesting about Kathleen Pettigrew is that she has fleeting mentions here and there within books, but her story has never been told. No one's actually delved in to who she actually was as a woman. And unlike the Miss Moneypenny character that we see in the Bond films and read about in the books, she wasn't born and taught how to hold a champagne glass. She came from very humble beginnings in Bermondsey in London, from a sort of upper working class, lower middle class background. Her family grew up in just 3 rooms above a flat, above the grocery shop. And from there, she really was a professional, self-made woman.
But it must have been a very sort of difficult environment for a woman to be working in those days. I mean, this, of course, being during the 1930s, 40s and 50s and onwards, certainly not an environment known for its gender equal approach.
Absolutely. She rose to the top of what was possible for her sex and gender in terms of professional secretarial work, but within the secret world of British intelligence, that's slightly more than filing and typing on the typewriter, which we sort of see her as the iconic woman sat behind. What's quite interesting about these women is, in terms of equality, is that I always find quite interesting is that the women who worked in British intelligence during the First World War and after were trusted to keep secrets, but they weren't trusted with the vote, which is incredible when you think about it, that they're working in this ultra-secret culture of the intelligence world, yet they aren't trusted to cast their vote for the country that they're serving.
Extraordinary. Given all of your research, Claire, do you think women make better spies?
The key question. I think they've certainly got excellent attributes that make them natural spies. I mean, just their gender is the perfect camouflage for moving around and not being suspected. One could argue perhaps that their powers of intuition are slightly more well-honed than men. But I think the fact that women had to fight so hard to work undercover, to become agent runners, to become officers, just shows that they were able to excel in all these areas that they were supposedly not supposed to be allowed to work in. So I think they've all proven their worth, as the women in the book show.
And of course, older women often complain about their invisibility in society, but I imagine in the world of intelligence that's certainly a massive attribute, is it not?
It is, absolutely. And Agnes Blake, who was the first female MI6 agent at the end of 1909, she was middle-aged, she was a widow, she was a translator, and she moved quite freely for her work to Germany. She did German translation work, and that enabled her to pass without a male chaperone because of her age and her marital status, being a widow, quite easily without being suspected. So it was the perfect camouflage.
Dr Claire Hubbard-Hall, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition. So until our next show, bye for now.